Bob, is there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Okay, I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Motion second, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. I need approval of the minutes of June 26, 2014. If there's any changes or additions, need to know those now.
Move approval. Second.
Motion second, approve the minutes of June 26, 2014. All in favor? Any opposed? Those minutes are now official. Members of the council, Councilman Glover, if you'd like to speak this time, you're on the wait.
Actually, I'm not quite ready. I apologize.
Okay, just let me know when you are. We're going to have a Nashville Next update. Well, Councilman Tenpenny and Dominic, either one of you would like to speak? Or you want to wait?
I'm waiting.
Okay. Jason, you're getting the Nashville Next. Who's doing Nashville Next?
Hi, good evening. My name is Brenda Diaz. I will give you a Nashville Next update. For those of you that don't know what Nashville Next is, it's a general plan for the next 25 years. So I will be speaking to you, giving you a brief update of two resource teams that we have, the housing team and the health, livability, and built environment housing team, or resource teams. So these two resource teams are part of 7 resource teams that help the steering committee and the community understand trends Nashville should respond to. They also have already developed goals and policies and actions in the fall that will also help adopt these trends and also the community vision. They also will harness land use, transportation, and infrastructure investments to meet the goals. And once this plan is adopted, they will also help implement it. So these resource teams work in phases, and what they did last summer was work based on driving forces. So they helped identify the major forces that affected Nashville's future. In the spring, they helped with drafting the goals and policies, and this fall they will help with the actions based on what the public has put with the input we've had from the summer. So for the housing resource team, we've had driving forces that help structure the goals and policies. These are gentrification, supply and demand, and the cost of living. So these driving forces have been the foundation for the goals and policies. What goals and policies are is a goal is a broad community level that desires for a future condition. The policies is a statement of intent to guide a decision towards the goal. In the fall, like I said, we will have concrete 1 to 5 year steps to implement these policies. The first goal for the housing resource team is to help maintain affordability for all housing types in all neighborhoods in Nashville. The second goal is to have a strong and diverse housing market that meets the housing market demand. The third housing goal is to reduce the negative effects of gentrification and have all neighborhoods benefit from the neighborhood improvements. The fourth housing goal is to have strong community networks that involve residents and supportive organizations and services, and have genuine access to all services and amenities. The next resource team is health, livability, and the built environment. These driving forces include community character, healthy living. As obesity is increasing in our neighborhoods, it's very important to have this as a major component of our quality of life. And as Nashville high school students, 75% did not engage in physical activity, in major part because they didn't have access to alternate modes of transportation. Another driving force is community fellowship, green living, helping our city become green and sustainable. And with also growing in population, we need to improve the conditions of infrastructure and make sure that it correlates with the growth in our population. So we have 6 goals for the health, livability, and built environment resource team. They include all Nashville residents have a choice of a vibrant and safe neighborhood across all community and contexts. Our second goal is to promote the safety and wellness of all neighborhoods, and to have equitable access to all goods, services, and transportation, of course, public safety. Our fourth goal is to welcome our residents and have community fellowship. Our fifth goal is to have a healthy, attractive, and supporting environmental and economic performance and green living. And our sixth goal is to have a safe and adequately maintained and intentionally planned infrastructure as we grow in Nashville. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Bob, any items to be deferred or withdrawn?
Yes, there are several items to be deferred that are requested for deferral. First item is item number 2, 2014 SP-041-001. This is a request to rezone from RM20 to SP zoning for properties located at 1212 Hawkins Street, 1119 and 1121 Sigler Street to permit up to 45 multifamily units. And the request is to defer that to the August 14th, 2014 Planning Commission meeting. The next item is item 3, 2014 SP-044-001. This is a request to rezone from RS5 to SP zoning for property located at 130 Marie Street, approximately 520 feet west of Meridian Street, to permit up to 2 detached units. And the request is to defer indefinitely. The next item is item 6 on the agenda. This is 2014 Z-044PR-001. This is a request to rezone from R15 to MUL and RM15A zoning for property located at 645 Old Hickory Boulevard and 7461 Charlotte Pike, approximately 880 feet east of Sawyer Brown Road. The request is to defer to the August 14th Planning Commission meeting. Next item is item 17 on page 9 of the agenda, 2012 S-048-002. This is a request for final plat approval to create one lot, dedicate easements, and a variance for street frontage on a portion of property located at Hospital Drive unnumbered. The request is to defer to the September 25th, 2014 Planning Commission meeting. And the last item on the deferral list is item 19, 2014 S-151-001. This is a request for final plat approval to create 6 lots within the Greenwood Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District on property located at 909 Manila Avenue. The request is to defer to the August 14, 2014 Planning Commission meeting. Those are all the items on the deferral list.
Thank you, Bob. Commissioners, you've heard the request that items 2, 3, 6, 17, and 19 be deferred. Is there a motion to honor that?
So moved. Second.
Motion second, all in favor? Any opposed? Those items have now officially been deferred. Any items on consent?
Yes, there are. And before I get to the consent agenda, as information for our audience, if you are not satisfied with the decision made by the Planning Commission today, you may appeal the decision by petitioning for a writ of cert with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of entry of the Planning Commission's decision. To ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met, please be advised that you should contact independent legal counsel. As noticed to the public, items on the consent agenda will be voted on at a single time. No individual public hearing will be held, nor will the Commission debate these items unless a member of the audience or the Commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda. So as I read these following cases into the consent agenda, please raise your hand and let the Commission know if you would like one of these items removed from the consent agenda. The first item is item 7 on page 6 of the agenda, 2013 SP-010-003. This is the Glen Echo Cottages Amendment. This is a request to amend the Glen Echo Cottages Specific Plan District for properties located at 1625, 1701, 1705, 1709 Glen Echo Road to add a parcel to the to the boundaries of the SP district and to permit 11 detached residential dwelling units. Staff recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all conditions. The next item on the consent agenda is item 8, 2014 SP-002-002. This is the Stadium Lofts amendment. This is a request to amend the Stadium Lofts specific plan district for property located at 1102 and 1138 3rd Avenue North and 1121 2nd Avenue North to allow a maximum height of 85 feet. Staff recommends approval with conditions and disapproval without all conditions. The next item is item 9, Woodland Grove, 2014 SP-054-001. This is a request to rezone from R6 to SP zoning for property located at 1121 and 1125 Chester Avenue to permit up to 16 detached residential dwelling units and a common house. Staff's recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all conditions. Next item on the consent agenda is item number 10, 2014 SP-055-001, the East Nashville Condo Project. This is a request to rezone from R6 to SP zoning for property located at 1106, 1110, 1114, 1200, 1202, and 1204 Lytton Avenue, and a portion of property located at 1120 Lytton Avenue to permit up to 130 residential units. The staff recommendation is to approve with conditions and to disapprove without all conditions. The next item is item 11, 2014 SP-057-001, the Hermosa Street parking lot. This is a request to rezone from RM20 to SP zoning and for final site plan approval for properties located at 1904, 1906, 1908B, and 1910 Hermosa Street to permit an automobile parking lot. Staff recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all conditions. Next item is item 12, 2014 Z-045PR-001. This is a request to rezone from CL to CS zoning for property located at 1001 Hickory Hill Lane. Staff recommendation is to approve. The next item is item 13, 2014 Z-046PR-001. This is a request to rezone from CS to MUNA zoning for property located at 503 Fisk Street. Staff recommendation is to approve. Next item is item 15, 88P-009-003, the Autumn Oaks Planned Unit Development Phase 6, 8C, and 9. This is a request for a revision to the preliminary plan for a portion of the Autumn Oaks Planned Unit Development Overlay District on properties located at Oakfield Grove unnumbered and Culbertson Road unnumbered to permit 42 single-family lots where 70 single-family lots were previously approved. Staff recommends approval with conditions. Item number 16, 89P-022-004, the Melrose Gale Park PUD, Lot 3. This is a request to revise the preliminary plan and for final site plan approval for a portion of the Melrose Commercial PUD Overlay District for property located at 2625 Franklin Pike to permit the development of a restaurant and retail building. Staff recommends approval with conditions of item 16. And then under other business, item 23, accept the director's report and approve all administrative items. That is the consent agenda.
Okay, I'm going to read these back, Bob, if you'll be sure that I'm correct on these. Items 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, and 23.
Correct.
Okay. Commissioners, you've heard the items to be approved on consent.
Chairman, I do a point of order. There's a matter that was on the consent agenda. It was number 5, 2014 SP 050001. that was on the consent agenda, someone came in today, staff notified us that they had an issue. Alan Thompson, Reagan School, has spoken with them. They've asked for a condition before agreement for having to articulate. We'd like to ask that we consider back on consent.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience here to listen to item 5 that would like to, the commissioner to hear that?
Chair, members of the board, I'm Fred Hicks. I own residential property on 5569 South New Hope Road in the Hermitage area. To that, my family has a residual ownership of the property known as 4021 Timberview Lane, to which borders the property, the 14-acre tract that's under discussion for NHC Central Pike rezoning or changing the zoning matter. As I have reviewed the narrative, as I have reviewed the plats in their simple format, there was no mention of utility easement authority. To that, I would request the board make that requirement that they be a easement authority granted up to our property corner to the east of South New Hope Road, from Central Pike to the corner of property known as 4021 Timberview Lane.
Yeah, just a minute. Yeah, I think probably with those conditions that you're requesting that we need to hear this at public hearing. So it won't be on consent. We'll have a public hearing on this at this meeting today.
Very well. Thank you.
Okay, Bob, let me go back through the items again then and make sure that we, commissioners, have them down. The items on consent are items 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, and 23.
That's correct.
Okay.
And before we take a vote, I would like to note my recusal from items 8, 9, 11, and 15.
We will note that in the record.
Secretary, so note that. Okay, commissioners, you've heard the items be on consent. Is there a motion to accept those?
So moved.
Motion second. All in favor? Any opposed? Those items have now been officially approved by the commission. The first item will be heard today is item number 1.
Good afternoon. My name is Cindy Wood, and I'm with the Community Plans Division with the Metro Planning Department staff. I'm presenting item 1A on your agenda. It's case number 2014 CP 011-001, and it is a request to amend the South Nashville Community Plan. After I make my presentation, Bob Lehman will come up and make his presentation on the specific plan zone change that's associated with this community plan amendment request, and his item will be item 1B on your agenda. That is case 2012 SP 029001. The applicant's request to amend the South Nashville Community Plan was filed before the Community Character Policy translation was adopted by the Planning Commission in this April. The request at that time was to change the land use policy for a property at 316 Tanksley Avenue from single-family attached and detached in neighborhood general to transition or buffer in neighborhood general. The applicant for the case is Dale & Associates, Inc., on behalf of the property owners who operate the business that is currently using the site. It's located on a nearby parcel, and the name of the business is Tire Recappers, Inc. The current policy, as translated, is called Urban Neighborhood Evolving, and it has a special policy on it that limits the development of the property to single-family detached or attached housing. These dashed black outlines that you see on this map represent different special policy areas within the South Nashville community plans. If the amendment request were to be approved, the new policy would be urban neighborhood evolving, but with a special policy that would be somewhat different. It would allow for this property to be used as a transition or buffer. The staff continues to recommend disapproval of this community plan amendment request. It was a request that had originally come before the Planning Commission in late 2012, and the Commission disapproved it at its December 12, 2012 meeting in accordance with the staff recommendation to disapprove. A new application was submitted for the plan amendment for the March 13, 2014 agenda, and the accompanying SP application, which had been deferred indefinitely in council, was re-referred with a new plan. The Planning Department staff held a community meeting in the local area on February 24th of this year to discuss the local community about the proposals, and a series of deferrals have brought the request to this meeting today. So just to give you a review, you see this is a February 2013 ortho photo, and you can see this the site of the amendment in its use at that time. It is zoned for residential. It is RS10. And here's a picture that was taken back at around the time that the request for the SP was deferred indefinitely in council. That was in early fall 2013. And these shots were taken this past Tuesday. And so this is how that site, it's the one that has the cars parked in front of it and the gravel and the concrete block fence. That was taken Tuesday. And here's where it faces the residential property across the street. And then this is taken as it's adjacent to the house next to it. So the single-family attached and detached policy on the site was applied as part of the Nolensville Pike Corridor Detailed Neighborhood Design Plan that was adopted along with the South Nashville Community Plan in 2007. And that lent additional detail to the policies for the area beyond what would normally have been in the plan. And under that detailed neighborhood design plan, a more mixed-use Nolensville Pike corridor is envisioned than was seen at that time and today, with an emphasis on increased walkability and a more stable and symbiotic relationship with adjacent neighborhoods that flank the corridors. This is an image that is in that detailed neighborhood design plan that shows the intent for the special policy for the site, the single-family attached and detached policy areas that flank the corridor. What you're seeing here are the Ireland Street townhomes, just nearby to here, in fact, that were developed on land that was formerly zoned for industrial use just off Rosa Parks Boulevard in Hope Gardens. So that's what the plan is currently envisioning as a transition. The proposed community plan policy, as I mentioned, is transition or buffer. And the site, as you can see here, adjoins an existing transition or buffer area to the north that faces onto Collier Avenue. These existing transition or buffer areas were already zoned for office or commercial use in 2007 when the South Nashville plan was updated. So here's another February 2013 ortho, and then here's some ground shots from Tuesday. This is auto parking that's facing 5 houses on the opposite side of the street. This is what they're looking at. And then shooting the picture back on the other side again, this is the interface of the housing with the parking areas that are on the opposite side of the street from the parking that you just saw. And these lots are all part of Action Nissan at the corner of Nolensville and Thompson. So again, to reiterate, the Nolensville Pike Detailed Neighborhood Design Plan discourages auto-oriented uses near residential uses, and I think that would say the previous slides help illustrate why that might be a concern. The parking lot in this case, also like the ones that you saw in Collier, will not be oriented towards Nolensville Pike. It'll be a freestanding lot with continued direct access to a narrow residential side street, and those business operations involve repeated crossing of Tanksley Avenue, and there has been a history of the street being blocked in association with the business. The detailed neighborhood design plan already provides guidance for appropriate transitions between the corridors, commercial uses, and single-family residential areas. And the plan is for the transitions to be made in a way that's similar to what you saw in Hope Gardens and other similar urban neighborhoods that have undergone some renaissance, where character, scale, and function of the adjacent residential environment are maintained and held to a standard of compatibility. And both the commission and staff disapproved this request in 2012, and staff continues to recommend disapproval. Thank you.
And I'll be presenting item 1B. This is the zone change, the associated zone change, 2012 SP-029-001, the Tanksley Avenue SP. This is the property outlined in red, as Cindy described, on Tanksley Avenue, just east of Nolensville Pike. Staff is recommending disapproval of the zone change request. The current zoning is residential, single-family, RS10 zoning. And as Cindy described, the current policy is single-family attached and detached and neighborhood evolving policy, and the proposed policy is transition or buffer in neighborhood evolving policy. As you may recall, in December of 2012, this zone change came to the Planning Commission. The plan was slightly different at the time. It included a parking area as well as a 1,200 square foot storage building. It did get through, I believe, 2 readings at council, and then the council re-referred it back, this zone change back to the Planning Commission because the plan was, the SP bill was amended to include a different site plan which eliminated this 1,200 square feet storage building, and it only includes the parking lot at this point. And so that is what is before the Planning Commission today, is this site plan for parking. It also called for equivalent landscaping. The council bill was amended and called for equivalent landscaping on the east side of the site. And I'm not exactly sure what was meant by the term equivalent parking, but I believe it was intended to have landscaping on the outside of this wall and on the inside of the wall, but it's not really defined in that council bill amendment what was intended by that. As Cindy stated, this request is still, it is inconsistent with the current policy, and we're recommending disapproval of the policy change. So staff's recommendation is still to disapprove the zone change. The primary reasons for the disapproval of the zone change is that it would allow a commercial parking area to be oriented towards a residential street and not towards the commercial corridor. It would be inconsistent with the residential nature of Tanksley Avenue, and there's no clear dividing line of if you rezone this property, it could set a bad precedent for other properties along Tanksley Avenue to be rezoned to commercial as well. There's no physical connection between this parking lot and its intended user across the street. The tire recapping business is on the other side of Tanksley Avenue, not adjacent to this parking area, which leads to other operational issues about there being no crosswalks in this immediate area, and how people parking in that area would have to walk mid-block across a residential street from one side of the street to the other to get to this parking area. So with that, staff is recommending disapproval still of the SP zoning on this property.
Thank you, Bob. This item is open for public hearing. The commissioners, we will hear, after the public hearing, we'll discuss these together and then vote on them separately. So, Applicant be allowed 10 minutes and you keep 2 back for rebuttal.
I have to go to another appointment as a council member. I'd just like to state that I'm in support of both 1A and 1B. This use has been there for a long time, long as I've been in Nashville, and it appears to be an appropriate buffer, given the maps that they brought up here just a brief moment ago, as a buffer between commercial and residential property. I wish I had time to state.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before we begin, may I make this inquiry? We've got 2 matters here, the policy change and the zone change. And I'm asking that the commission consider a max of 15 minutes per side. On the presentation, there's a number of people that have been in front of the commission previously. We've done some organization in advance to make sure there's just me and Roy Dale that will do the presentation. There'll be no others, but rather than do the 10 and then everybody else line up in the queue, we'd like to ask that we be given 15 minutes, a max of 2 of that for rebuttal. I think we can make it much shorter than having a number of people line up for their 2 minutes afterwards. That's our request.
Is there others in the audience that would like to speak besides the, okay. So we're going to have a couple others. There's at least 3.
I don't know if they're in support, Mr. McLean. If they're, what we try to do is get those in support to allow the presentation to be done by me. And if they're here in
The ones that
support,
raised the hand, are you in support of this bill or in opposition? In support? Okay, we do have some opposition, so I'm going to, sake of brevity, which you said we could do by speaking to no one else, but I'm just going to allow you 10 minutes. So you can keep 2 back for rebuttal.
We're going to hold 2 minutes back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Roy Dale, and I'm representing the applicant on this process. Tire Recappers has actually been in business at this location since 1960, prior to metropolitan government. And over those years, most recently, their business has grown, and obviously their activities have increased. They have very limited parking and very limited loading space. As a result of that growth, over a year or so, a request was made to place a storage building on the parcel that we're talking about today, and also to use that as parking. Right now it has unstructured parking. The request for a building was poorly represented at the commission and to the community, and as a result of that poor representation, it caused a lot of friction between both sides. And it's sort of been hard to overcome that. But Tom White and I were hired to attempt to do that, to try to find a win-win scenario. I've attended a number of community meetings, and it seems like that each time we have a meeting, everybody seems to somewhat get closer together, and so that's a positive. The first solution was simply to remove the building that was on the original plan, remove the structured building, and then take the existing parking area and supplement it with landscaping. At our community meeting that we had back in February, we presented this revised plan. I think I've given you copies on the 3rd page as a revised plan with landscaping. But at the community meeting that we had, that was attended by about 40 people, I would say about 2-to-1 ratio was in approval of what we had requested, was to take the existing parking and convert it into a structured parking lot with heavy landscaping to provide a nice transition and buffer. But I gathered something from these meetings. The one thing I heard over and over again was the history of the property and how much parking had been used on the site for a number of years. So I went back to Metro. I went upstairs to the GIS division, and I started pulling aerial photographs, and I pulled them as far back as I could. And as far back as I could, there was parking on this property. This photo that you have right here was actually taken in 2000. And you can see this site was used for parking as far back as 2000. But I went back, actually I put an old USGS map from 1970 and showed parking. So what we did is we reached out to the community to find some older people that had lived there all their lives. We reached out to 70 and 85-year-old people, and we have a number of affidavits that say that this parcel has been used for parking for 50 to 60 years. And I think that's important. And I'll sort of go to land use policy. A number of years ago, when Metro looked at the land use policy, and when I looked at the overall land use policy on Nolensville Pike, you could see that the policy followed existing uses, but it also followed roads and alleys. And on this particular case, between the businesses on Nolensville Pike and the residents, the alley was chosen to be the point you would go from commercial to residential. But there really was no alley there, and there hasn't been an alley there. I think it was inadvertent, but I think if Metro had looked at the uses of the property, they would have simply mapped that line in a different location. And that's more or less what I've shown on this larger scale photograph that I gave you. You can see the property that we're talking about is in red, and I drew a blue line. That blue line is really where the policy transition should have occurred, based upon existing uses in the area, not based upon an alley that really wasn't even there. Looking at the site and looking at the affidavits that we have, this site has been gravelled. At some point in time years ago, it probably wasn't gravel, but it was clearly parked on. It's had wooden fences, it has had barbed wire fences, it's totally unstructured, and I think that what we're proposing is a far better situation than you have today. There are a number of sound reasons why the land use policies should be changed beyond using it for parking right now. On Nolensville Pike, I think in the future, if there's mixed use there, the buildings on Nolensville Pike will shift up towards Nolensville Pike, requiring parking at the rear. These properties are valuable to use as parking in the future. Tire recappers, you can't really see the front of their building, but basically there's such narrow parking area there, in order to get out, you're backing out into the street. They have no place to park. So even if their employees park in this parking area here, it's going to provide them a much more functional building. Again, they've been there for 60 years. And there are a number of other buildings along Nolensville Pike that are the same way. Very limited parking in the front of buildings where you're basically having to pull out into the street. So when those properties redevelop, it's valuable to have these parcels behind as a transition for a transitional use, and parking would be that transitional use. The creation of a structured parking with extensive landscaping, which we're proposing, is far better than the non-structured parking that exists today. And we feel like it will provide a better transition and a better point of demarcation, basically, between commercial transitional use and residential use. There has never been a house on this site. As far back as I've looked, I've never seen a structure on this property. And there's not likely to ever be a house built there. This property should have been in a transitional area, and that's what we're requesting. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the first thing I'll comment is everybody that's land use or legally trained will recognize the principle that land use restrictions are to be interpreted in favor of the property owner. That is, policy and land use restrictions are to be liberally interpreted in favor of that owner. In this particular case, we need to look and consider the use of this property. Without repeating what Roy Dale said, it's undisputable that the parking on this property is grandfathered in. It's legally non-conforming. And here's the issues that I'll give to you. I've asked the staff to hand you out 4 specific letters. These are from residents that have lived in the area. I'll read the very first one. It's from Mr. Neal. It says, I've lived in the area which is close to the amendment site since at least 1945. I'm aware that during the time referenced above, there has been no residential or other building on the property. The property has always been used for automobile parking. Over the years, this was for additional parking for businesses which are located on Nolensville Road. A number of these businesses over the years were Western Auto, Tire Recappers, and other businesses prior to the time of the operation of Western Auto and Tire Recappers. I have no interest in the outcome of the decision of the Planning Commission, but feel that in light of the history of the use on this property, the request should be granted. There's a second letter. I'm not going to read it because of time purposes, from Mr. Wallace McMahon, who's lived at 302 Tanksley Avenue since the late 1950s. Exact same conclusion. It's been used for automobile parking from that date. Third letter, Bill McPherson, again, lived in the area, familiar with the property since at least 1950. Fourth letter, Mr. Philip Sandin, same conclusion, been in the area since 1947 or 1948. Now, Metro government didn't come about till 1963. The first comprehensive zoning was 1974, referred to as COMZO. So the use we've got on this property is clearly a grandfathered use. It existed long before any other of these zone changes we're talking about. My comment to the commission is basically this. In looking for the policy issue we're talking about here and in looking at the zone change issues, we need to take into account what has historically been the use of the property. These letters are unrefuted. There's no question, I think all the records will indicate, and we have looked at the Metro archives, we've looked at the Metro planning, we've looked at the Metro platting. No one has any information, nobody inconsistent with these letters.
None of these people have got anything to gain by their comments. My comment to you is, at this point, I've advised the client they have a legally non-conforming use. They've got a right to use that property for parking, in my opinion, without any dispute. I'm asking the commission to approve the policy change and the zone change so that it's consistent with what the client has been seeing on this property for the last 60-plus years. In addition, I'm suggesting to you that, in my opinion, if it is a legally non-conforming grandfathered use, why would we not approve it at this level instead of having something inconsistent on the maps vis-a-vis what's going to actually continue to stay in place on that site? Because through the Planning Commission or through the judicial system, there's going to be a recognition of a grandfathered use on this site for parking, period. It's going to happen, in my opinion. This is the place to address it and do it correctly. I appreciate your courtesies. We'll save the remaining time for rebuttal. Thank you for your courtesies.
Got a minute and 6 seconds left for rebuttal. Anyone in the audience wishing to speak in support?
My name is John Brittle, Jr. I live at 5474 Franklin Pike Circle, which is Brentwood address in Davidson County. I live there because I grew up in Creve Hall and been shopping on Nolensville Road my entire life. The comment I'd like to make is about practical use. And I wasn't invited here today to speak on this, but since my team and I are on the ground in the Nolensville Road neighborhoods every day now, what we're doing is we work in those buffers every day. And I can tell you, we don't have anybody who's going to build any houses looking at the back of that building that would be a good buffer. Not yet, and may not for years. We do need these buffers between these neighborhoods. I think that a landscaping buffer would help the property next door a lot. These buffers all the way down Nolensville Road, and I've studied every one of them on every side street, from the fairgrounds all the way down to the zoo. And we need these places to be used by these businesses because, and in the future when we have some density of housing and mixed use there, that'll be good. But the house directly contiguous to this parking lot, I believe, as a residential use now, will be more valuable with a landscaping buffer. And I don't see us putting new houses anytime soon where those trucks are parked. So I would ask you, as a residential realtor and a longtime resident of this area, to seriously consider what the real live use is of these buffer areas. Right now, we need more, honestly, we need more space between the commercial and the R6 or RS75. And until we get to that point, I believe that any addition of buffer, especially landscaping buffer, is helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in support? Seeing none, anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Please come to the microphone, state your name, your address, please. You'll be allowed 2 minutes.
Laura Kelly, 3001 Dobbs Avenue. Ladies and gentlemen, my concern is that the owners are not using this lot in compliance with the zoning now, and you saw that since all this started that they've gravelled and built a wall across half of it. They're frequently blocking the street, and they said their original intent was to park trucks on it and unload them back and forth into their building across the street. And then they said they weren't going to do that. You know, I think this has been before you 3 times now, and you've rejected it every time, and then they come back. As far as this gentleman saying that we're closer together, I would like for you to know that the last community meeting resulted in one of the tire recappers employees assaulting a neighbor. And as far as 2-to-1 approval or support by the people that were at the meeting, they brought their entire staff to the meeting who don't live in the neighborhood. We neighbors who have opposed this have had lug nuts loosened on our tires, nails in our tires, dead animals on our front porches. You know, these aren't the kind of people that are going to use the land.
If you would, just
that are gonna-
stick with the facts of what,
Okay.
why you don't want the parking there, but
Okay.
not character assassination.
The neighbors in the immediate area are opposed. You know, we filed a petition of people that lived in the area that were opposed to it because of the street being blocked, not wanting encroachment into our residential neighborhood. And then they turned around and went to all of their friends, anybody they could get who didn't live in the area, to get more signatures on a petition. That's the
Thank
kind
you,
of
ma'am.
silliness we're dealing with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition?
Hi, I'm Dee Dee Brickner. I live at Copeland Drive in Nashville. I think they made a good argument initially, and so I'm a little bit more on the fence now than I was before. I understand now more that it's always been a parking lot, but they continue to make structured parking lot out of it. They've added masonry walls, more wire fences, more gravel, even when they've been disapproved. The lot directly, if this is northeast, southwest, if directly south of that has a house on it now, a lot of cars park in it. It's directly behind tire recappers, which is an industrial operation that really seems to have outgrown where they are. But anyway, the lot south of the one in the conversation about, there's a house, it has parking on it. I assume that one's next. So then what's after that one? It seems to me, if it's an industrial site and it's gotten too big, it should go to industrial property somewhere else. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, you've got 1 minute and 6 seconds for rebuttal, and then we'll close the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you see, we've come a long way. 3 months ago, we would probably had 50 people stand up in opposition to this. We simply want to, we have a plan. It's going to create a structured parking. It's going to create landscaping where there is no landscaping now. It's far better than what is there today. There's actually an alley behind the existing tire recappers. We're going to close that alley. It's going to all go back to them, and they're going to landscape that too. I know that's not a part of this proposal, but that's an effort that they're trying to make. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll close on the note that the ultimate issue here is the land use on the property for, according to these letters, unrefuted here today, for 60 to 70 years has had this parking on this site. Earliest letters, 1945, others slightly later, 60 to 70 years. We talk about policy, we talk about zoning. All of that is long, long, long after the fact. What controls here is what took place for 60 to 70 years. It's a grandfathered use. It's legally non-conforming. I'm urging the commission to approve the policy and the zone change, get them all on the same page where they're going to end up being anyway. Thank you for your courtesies.
I declare the public hearing closed. Councilman, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, can I say something, sir?
Just come
Okay.
forward.
The councilman wanted to speak before.
Yeah, excuse me, just a minute.
Yes, I'd like to have the
Councilman, I'm
floor,
sorry.
maybe a minute or two.
Sure,
to speak a little bit on this also. My name's Tony Tenpenny. I'm council member of the 16th District, and this is where I grew up. I just wanted to say to the board this afternoon that, you know, I can remember in 1968, my father taking me to that Western Auto store that is directly in front of those trailers and trucks and buying my first bicycle. I'm 51 years old now. I had to go behind one of the trailers where Mr. Waller kept all of his stuff to restock his store, and I picked my bicycle up there. Y'all, that was like 1968 when I did that. I have never known this piece of property to be anything but a catch-all for I mean, you can look at it there. And I'm glad you're showing this picture right here. Those trailers are not even tire recappers right now. They're storage that is for the AutoZone, which used to be there, and it's also for the hardware store that used to be there also. This property has always been a parking lot for the people over at the Honda shop when it was there, for the hardware store, for the Western Auto, for tire recappers, even the Ben Franklin and across the street, it's been there. As I look at the property, you can see why there's never been a house built on that piece of property there. As you've heard today, we've had several old community members that grew up in Woodbine that'll let you know what that property has been used for. I'm going to go back as far as 1950, 1960. It's never been used for anything but a parking lot. And I would ask this board to really consider that today when they consider the land use policy of that property. And that's what it's been, and I really feel like that is a grandfathered piece of property right there for what the land use policy's been for the last 60, 70 years over there. And I would ask for your approval on both of these today. Thank you.
Thank you. Walter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, after listening to all the facts and realizing that the property has always been used for parking and there's been no residential houses on it, I see no reason not to approve it. So I make a motion to approve for policy and zone change and for further discussion if necessary.
Is there a second to that, and then we'll move on for discussion? Okay, don't have a second on it just yet. Andre?
I guess I have some questions. I just want to understand that when we look at policy, when we've dealt with...
Commissioner, I'm sorry, but without a second, we need to deal with that motion, that it failed without a second. It can be brought back up again later, but we need to deal with it now before having further discussion.
We don't have a second to vote on, so...
So then it fails for lack of a second, and then they can be raised again later. I just didn't want it hanging out there for the record.
Okay, that was what I'd hoped I indicated, but I'm sorry. Okay, Andre?
When we're looking at policy today, and our 2007 policy, there are often non-conforming uses that have been in place and grandfathered. Is the point of discussion then when something is to then be rezoned in the future according to, it is to be addressed in the current policy? And often do we have non-conforming uses that then get changed according to the new policy, or is it always grandfathered and therefore it is forever that?
Well, typically when we have in our newer community plans uses that do not conform to either the zoning or the policy or both, there's direction given at a general level and sometimes specifically for the property in question as to what might be done in terms of either expanding or intensifying the zoning. And in general, we don't seek to expand or intensify the zoning or use unless a special notation or policy is made otherwise. This is one of our older community plans, so it doesn't have maybe property-specific guidance on a non-conforming use that might be on a particular site the way you'd see in the West Nashville or North Nashville community plan, but it does have general guidance that wants for the non-conforming use and/or zoning to move closer to the direction of the policy over time, and that's generally by avoiding any intensification or expansion or territorial expansion. Is that what you're kind of asking?
That answers the question. And then just listening to the conversation, if the first zoning was in 1963 when we formed our county, it was residential at the time. Is that correct? The zoning has always been residential?
Actually, the first zoning for Metro didn't come into place until COMSO, which I believe was in 1974. Until that time, the separate zoning for the city and county would have applied. I'm not sure if Woodbine was in the city of Nashville in 1963, or this is actually further south than Woodbine. combined, so, I mean, that would be something
I guess
that's
what I was
something
wondering
to
is the
check.
initial zoning, once it was finally zoned,
Point of order, that is actually not.
okay. Was it, when it was finally zoned, was it initially zoned residential?
When COMSO came into being, right, it was zoned residential, and it may have been zoned single and two-family and changed to single-family only. I don't remember if our single-family only districts came into existence in 98, you think? Yeah, so it's now single-family only, but...
I just wanted to clarify that it's history. I'm interested in the policy, thinking about Nolensville Road and how it would get redeveloped in the future potentially. I think we're encouraging things to be built to the road and potential mixed use or residential. And so I understand the interest in depth of lot and the importance of that. So I'm a little bit on the fence about that point. The question I had, I think if we're going to think in those terms, then we want alleys, we want to define alleys, we want alleys to be open so that the units, whatever they are, facing Nolensville would have alley access. So I think the alley is important to be defined and kept and maintained in place. And my question is, if this were going to, as long as this owner owns it and it's not, the use isn't being changed, it can still be parking. I mean, if nothing happened today, they could still use it as parking because it's non-conforming unless we change the zoning to something else. Is that correct?
I would leave that to an attorney.
Okay, well, so my point in raising that question is, if it is still going to be parking, it seems like one of the big questions for the neighbors was the safety and the use of Tanksley as the entrance. And so what I'm wondering is, if it is going to be used as parking, whether it's non-conforming or allowed, could the entry to the parking not be to the alley? And then it would be facing the commercial uses, it'd be facing Nolensville Road, it'd be facing future development along Nolensville Road, and it would be using the alley instead of the street for its access.
There's the alley.
And I just feel like it's safety and concern of traffic on Tanksley. These are issues that have been raised over and over, and it's always been said, but it's the entrances on Tanksley. So
okay, here, that's why I went back to this slide. Here, there is right-of-way for an alley. This is tire recappers. You see, it's hard to see, but there's a little bit of right-of-way here. Here you see there is not right-of-way for an alley.
Oh, so
Maybe one of Bob's slides shows that better, because mine has all kinds of lines on it. He's got a zoning slide in here. Yeah, so you see the alley that was being referred to is here, not by the property, the subject site. There is no alley. Nor is there one behind it.
And I guess another question that was raised with the neighbors was, if this were changed, where does it stop from there? And we've got transitional OR 20 to the north and to the northeast. What line would we maintain or draw if we were to change this one? Would it need to align with the existing transitional? Would it stay here? How would we address that policy in the future if we change this?
I think that's part of the series of questions that this raises. How would we, where would we stop it? Because looking at the aerial, you can see that, for example, the idea of lining it down that way. Previous slide showed, sorry to keep jumping back and forth, this is where you just saw that aerial on Collier, where that OR 20 is ending, is this concrete block wall. Beyond that concrete block wall is what appears to be a house with a commercial sign in front of it. So sometimes transitions that are formed simply through zoning for, say, a parking lot or something, perhaps using a brick wall or something of that nature, are more difficult to hold than a transition that's formed through more thoughtful design, through buildings that have certain access points and so forth. So that, I think, was part of showing these slides, is that is proven to be maybe a little challenging to hold. See if I can, there. So this kind of zooms in a little further. So that's where you see that OR 20.
So is there also not an alley on that transitional one that comes up to Collier's? There's no alley there either?
Right, that's right.
Okay.
There's a block wall right about there.
I mean, on the western side of that.
Oh, okay.
No.
Whoops.
And that side, on the
Here.
yellow square just to the north?
No, there wasn't an alley.
So there's no alley between Tanksley and Collier?
Right.
Okay. I'd like to hear from the rest of my colleagues.
Greg?
Sorry about that. I guess the question that I have is, just to be sure, and maybe this is a staff question, but to be clear, it's always been residential, it's never been zoned for parking?
Right. We have no record of it being zoned for commercial or legally permitted for commercial. I mean, it may have been parked on for years, but we have, in searching through the records, we found nothing that showed that they had a legal permit to do that.
Like a use permit, they didn't have a parking permit or anything? Well, it is an interesting quandary. I mean, without an alley and with OR 20 beside of it, it's, and it being used for parking for such a long time, I want to hear from the other commissioners as well.
Stuart?
So, slide it up.
Conspiracy. This is not, in the staff's estimation, a legal non-conforming use.
We checked with the zoning administrator, and there is no record of this being legally permitted for commercial, so that is our position, correct?
It seems to me that the commission has spoken for a long time about the area, perhaps idealistically, but we've seen things happen in this town that we never thought would happen in terms of mixed use, where people thought of it as just being inner city, burned out industrial that was never going to be anything. But we've been on record for a long time as wanting to kind of move away from certain uses in this area. I was intrigued by the testimony that the use there now was, at least in function, a little bit more industrial than maybe it has been in the past. Could you address that? What is tire recappers in terms of how we would look at that functionally?
I mean, tire recappers is in a CS zone district. Across the street is CS zoning,
Right.
and it is a permitted use where that building is located.
Because it is a retail use, or what?
I don't remember the exact classification. We did look this up. This has been around since 2012.
Right.
And I know that we did research that in the code, but it is a permitted use in CS zoning. It's just the commercial or the parking that they're asking for across the street is not a permitted use in the RS10 zoning where that parking lot is.
It looks to me like the staff analyzed this the way we expect them to, and the way we kind of set up when we approved the plan, which is why this requires a change in the plan. I'm not ready to support it, and I believe that, especially since it seems to be an illegally non-conforming use instead of a legal non-conforming use, but I'm happy to hear from everyone else. Thanks.
Hunter?
I have a couple of questions. I think you've answered most of them. Am I on? What triggered zone change. If this has been used for parking for many years. Is it that they want to make improvements to the parking lot? Is it a challenge from the community or?
I mean, it's my understanding that there was that the codes department, someone called the codes department and asked them to go out and look to see if this was being used appropriately. And it's my understanding that the codes department has looked at it and found that it was not an appropriate use for the RS10 zoning, and then the adjacent owner filed the rezoning request to use it for parking, is my understanding.
And could I ask our legal counsel, help us understand what makes something a legal non-conforming versus an illegal non-conforming use?
At risk of sounding familiar, the zoning administrator gets to make the determination, the final determination on behalf of the metropolitan government as to, let me rephrase that, makes the initial determination as to what is a legally non-conforming use and what is not. To the extent an applicant for a zoning change disagrees with the decision from the zoning administrator, they have the right to appeal that decision to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and to the extent they disagree with the decision made by the Board of Zoning Appeals, that's subject to appeal to the Chancery Court, much like decisions made by this commission. So it's something that the Planning Commission doesn't have to make a final call upon at this meeting or at any other, because the zoning administrator is the one to do so in those instances. I hope that doesn't evade the answer, but I think it drives to the point of what the Planning Commission is looking at today.
Sure, thank you. I think Andre alluded to something that we talk about often on these corridors is one of the challenges to redeveloping these corridors is the lack of depth in the commercial zones. And you know, I think if someone was coming in to redevelop this whole corner and using this site for parking with landscaping, much like the plan that we see here today, it might make a lot of sense to see the parking that's necessary for a redevelopment. But we're not looking at a redevelopment today of that area. So, I think perhaps it's up to the Board of Zoning Appeals and ultimately the courts to determine the issue of use and not us today. I guess one question would be that on an SP like this, or excuse me, it's not an SP, is that right?
Yeah, no, it's an SP rezone.
Okay. Would we typically require sidewalks to be installed along the street?
I think we take sort of parking lots case by case to see what the surrounding is, but it would, I think if there was a network in that area, we would. If there was not a network, it's possible that we would not. So I think we would just look at those on a case by case basis generally in an SP situation.
Okay. 'Cause it seems to me like some of the concerns of the neighborhood could begin to be addressed if there was other improvements made, connections to Nolensville Road, other ways to mitigate some of the pedestrian issues and traffic issues there. But I guess those aren't part of this proposal. If there was a motion or if we entertain the motion to approve this, I'd like to see, and maybe it would need to come back to us, but I would like to see a condition that would include building a sidewalk on either one side or the other. And I know that they don't control one side of the street, but building a sidewalk to connect the neighborhood out to Nolensville Road.
May I, Mr. G, you asked a question about why this all came together and everything. In your last, wanting to look at sidewalks, the gentleman that owned the piece of property, the tire recappers, they are going to put sidewalks down the side there. That's in their initial plan of what they're wanting to do. And the reason that they're wanting to put this parking lot and keep it a parking lot like it's always been since about 1950 is because of what's going on out in Nolensville Road, having to park vehicles right out in front of the businesses not only is it dangerous and it's a safety hazard, it's also, it looks terrible. They would like to get all of their cars and trucks and vehicles over into the parking lot instead of out front on Nolensville Road. And I mean, I've rode a bicycle through that alleyway all my life. Folks, I have no idea why this piece of property is, I mean, I don't know why we're really fighting about this piece of property. It is a transitional piece of property that is just gone terrible.
Thanks for clarifying. No.
The biggest issue I saw was the conversation about this being a legal or illegal non-conforming use, and I think our counsel and Bob did a good job of explaining what the distinction is and whether that was our distinction to make, whether it is illegal or illegal non-conforming use. I actually don't have anything further to add.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm listening to the conversation on this piece of property. We have non-conforming lots throughout all of Nashville. I got some in my district. And that's probably non-conforming because the fact at the time that they, and I remember Western Auto and all that over there, but at the time that they looked at that lot, it was in Woodbine before the consolidation because the city limits of Nashville stopped at the railroad tracks at Purity Dairies. So they couldn't have been involved in the city. So that's probably one reason it is non-conforming, because of the fact of the difference between the county and the city. Having said that, I renew my motion to approve it both for policy and the policy change.
The motion fails for lack of a second. Is there another motion?
I'd like to say that this is more complicated than we have time to unravel today, and that as much as people sound very much on one side or the other, and we've heard before about this, and we've always voted with the staff's recommendation, that I'm not trying to suggest that the people who are for this want something that's wrong. It's just not something I think we can approve in light of our plan, and there's been no good reason proposed to change our plan. I would move that we approve the staff recommendation.
Is there a second?
And I guess we were going to vote separately, though, so.
So your motion would be for, to disapprove the
sub-area plan
amendment?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you second that?
Right,
Okay,
second.
there's a motion second to go with staff recommendation to disapprove the change in the community plan amendment. All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. So that would, we would not need to make a vote on item 1B. Right.
Can under our rules.
So we're now ready for item number 4.
No,
Did have to vote on the zone
yes,
change.
but you have to take action on, because it's on the agenda.
On 1B?
Yes.
Okay, motion then?
I move we disapprove this pursuant to our rule that we cannot approve something in direct conflict with our general plan.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4.
All right. Good afternoon. This is item number 4 on your agenda, 1008 Joseph Avenue. This is a request to rezone from RS5 to SPR to permit up to 2 detached dwelling units on Joseph Avenue located east of Dickerson Pike. Staff recommendation is to approve with conditions and to disapprove without all conditions. The property is currently zoned RS5, and surrounding zoning is also RS5 as well as CL. The property is located in the mixed-use and community center policy. The SP is consistent with the policy, which supports a variety of housing options in addition to commercial uses. The SP also supports 2 critical planning goals. It supports infill development and a variety of transportation choices. Here we have a view of the plan. The SP would permit either detached 2-family dwelling or a single-family dwelling. Access to both units would be from the alley. The plan includes some representational architectural images that we have here. And the plan also proposes some regulatory standards. These include building height, which would be limited to a maximum of 2 stories and 29 feet at the front setback and 35 feet overall. It also includes some standards that address the architectural materials, porches, windows, and so forth. Here we have a view of the site. And in conclusion, staff recommends approval with conditions and disapproval without all conditions.
Thank you. This item is open for public hearing. The applicant be allowed 10 minutes. You may keep 2 back for rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Roy Dale, again, representing the applicant on this, who's Regal Homes. This was on your agenda last meeting, as was one on Marie Street. The council member requested that both of those be deferred in order to attend a community meeting, a meeting which occurred. Mr. Regal, who's my client, attended that meeting, as did myself, and we presented both the projects to the community. The community did not obviously like the project on Marie Street because it did not have alley access, and as a result of that, we put on an indefinite deferral. Marie Street will not be heard, and my client told the community he'd build a single-family house there, so that's good. On Joseph Street, this does have alley access. It's at the rear of the property. It's a mixed-use policy. It's very close to Dickerson Pike. My applicant, the client, met with the community and agreed to do some architectural changes on the buildings to provide different elevations, different finishes. He's going to be working with the council member to incorporate that into the plan. But this is a very appropriate use at an appropriate location where policy endorses this type of use. It's perfect as far as I can say, and I think staff more or less has agreed to that by the recommendation of approval. So again, this was deferred from the last meeting to have a community meeting, which we did have, and that community meeting had some positive results, and that one inappropriate use has been removed from your agenda, and the more appropriate use remains as being recommended approval. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in support? Seeing none, anyone wishing to speak in opposition?
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Dane Forlines, live at 805 North 2nd Street. I had some questions about the staff report. The staff report suggests that this is consistent with the character of the surrounding community. I'm not really clear on that. The established character in the surrounding community is one home on one lot with an occasional one duplex that's 2,000 square feet or less on one lot. So I'm not sure how 2 homes on one lot conforms to the surrounding established character. I think the plan views that you saw on the screen show there's an established rhythm to the street with homes of a certain scale, and this is, in my opinion, considerably different than what is established. So I'm a little confused about that. The staff report also suggests that this will add density while serving existing transit routes. I've had some questions about this type of development and the way that it promotes density, particularly the 2 homes on one lot. I've done some visual site surveys of 2 neighborhoods, 12 South and the Nations, where I know that since 2000, the year 2000, there's been population declines in these neighborhoods. So I went and inspected these neighborhoods, and during the time of the population decline, There were 30 of these types of units added to 12 South, resulting in a population decline of 3% over that time period. There were 62 of these types of units added to the Nations, with a population decline of 6% during the same time. I think that it's important that we look at the housing type, not just the number of housing units and how it impacts density. I'd like to point out that the neighborhood of Buena Vista during that time has seen a 12% increase in population, while seeing a 7% decrease in total housing units and 12% increase in vacant housing units. I think that it's important that we look at the type of house that we're talking about, the architectural type, the massing, and so forth, and how that can help us achieve our goals of increasing density. I've contacted the planning department about this issue. There's been no study to show a correlation between two homes on one lot supporting population density. In 12 South and the Nations, it seems like we've seen the opposite effect. So I think that there needs to be a closer look at how these housing types support density. I would also like to point out that the detailed neighborhood design plan is 8 years old, a bit obsolete, and I don't think that it currently reflects the desire of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, you're allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really don't have a lot to add, other than we did meet with the Cleveland Park organization, which I think the last speaker was a part of. My client has come a long way. He's doing a lot of things in this community voluntarily. So he's not like some of the people you saw on TV this week that are, going in and taking advantage of older people. That's not the case. He's interested in helping this area grow. He's active in the Maplewood High School. He's helping people repair their homes, and these are things that he's wanting to do. And he wants to be a good neighbor. As a result of the meeting that we had, he is going to change some architectural style. It's not going to be the same building next to the same building. He's agreed to these standards that you see here. He's going to change some pitches on some roofs. He may do one of a story and a half, another 2-story, and so he's putting forth a solid effort to put in something that's going to be that will set the right pattern for infill development within this community. So, thank you so much.
Thank you. I declare the public hearing closed, and Lily, start with you.
This is a question for staff. There's a question raised about the staff's analysis that this development would be consistent with either the policy or the character of the neighborhood. Can you kind of explain that?
Absolutely. That analysis is based on that they are proposing a residential use. This policy would support mixed use, so it could be any type of residential housing, whether it be single-family, two-family, or even more dense than that, or as well as some commercial uses. So with regard to the type of use, it is consistent with the neighborhood.
And there was mention that obviously most of these surrounding sites have a single family unit, but there are duplexes scattered within there, but there's no other site where there's 2 detached homes on there. Is that right? That's near.
I don't recall off the top of my head.
Okay, that's okay.
Hunter? No comments. Stuart?
If we approve this, then there is no logical reason not to approve this on each of those lots. Is that right, probably, from a planning perspective?
Well, the policy on those lots that are in the orange would support this type of use.
A lot of times, I think developers think that when we have a policy, then that means that a proposed rezoning that is not in conflict with the policy means that it must be approved. But that is not legally required, is it?
No, not necessarily. In this case, looking at the plan, we did look at as having 2 detached units. It does present a single-family appearance at the street. Also, there are additional elements. There is an alley which will be used for both units, so there won't be access at the street. So there are other elements that we do consider when evaluating this type of proposal.
I think essentially, this is sort of a new thing for me because, we have obviously had our discussions over the years about subdivisions and comparability and compatibility and all of that, and this would be unthinkable a few years ago, but obviously we're at a different time now. We're looking at ways to improve density. I think this is kind of an unusual thing for us to take one lot. It's the kind of thing that 15 or 10 or 7 or 4 years ago might have been thought of as spot zoning, practically speaking, if not legally. It's just unusual. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It means I'm not comfortable with it, though. And the other thing that I think we're gradually understanding as we go through our Nashville Next, even though we've had people come here at public hearings and talk about the need to promote gentrification, which was just last meeting or so that we voted that way. But we have seen in the community a lot of belief that gentrification and density for its own sake is not great in an overall system where we don't have any practical attention to affordability at all. We may be at the point where we don't need to be rezoning unless and until the area has at least some possibility of, perhaps through a carrot and stick approach for the development community, has some aspect of affordability which we do not here have. So those are some of my thoughts about this.
Greg? Walter?
No comment.
Andre?
Well, I'd like to look at the policy map again. I'm just curious how was the decision made to come east of the alley? I guess because I'm sort of curious why it didn't stop at the alley, or how the line was made at the policy that we came into part of Joseph, but only part of Joseph. It just seems a little odd. I'm just curious how that came about. Because this is a neighborhood plan, it was a lot of community input, and so somebody thought this was a good idea on a universal level, and I'm interested to know what that was.
I can help answer that because worked on this detailed neighborhood design plan back in 2006. But at the time, people may remember the plan of Nashville that was done by the Nashville Civic Design Center, and that had come out recently, and we were studying that quite a bit and working to reflect it within community plans that we were working on that it affected. And that was part of it, in that we were looking at this lower end of Dickerson Pike as becoming significantly more intense over time in the future, and that we thought that in that particular area so close to downtown, we would need more depth. And that could take, a couple different forms. One could be going back beyond the alley and consolidating parcels, or that you could have the intensity be right on the corridor and then sort of step down, and you see this mixed housing that's on the opposite side of Joseph Avenue, so that you're transitioning away from the most intensity back into the single family, because people that participated at that time were willing to entertain ideas of greater intensity, of mixed use along Dickerson and mixed housing along their major streets, and with the thought that they were going to protect the more single-family character of the interior of the neighborhoods that you see in yellow. And there are actually, within the plan that you don't have, there are design illustrations that give sort of a better visual understanding of how that would be.
So remind us us what the Brown policy is?
That's mixed housing, and that it would, like, similar to what you just heard, in addition to allowing mixture. The mixed use is different from the mixed housing in that, in addition to different variety of housing, it also permits mixed use.
Well, Stuart, with that, if that's the case, and it was the consensus of the policy, which is established, then does that make it not spot zoning? Because if we were in the little yellow part saying we want mixed housing or we want commercial mixed use opportunity in the middle of that pale yellow, which conflicts directly with that policy, is that something more spot zoning than when we're in the policy area that is allowing and looking toward the future and hoping for mixed use, that we're getting something that is denser? It's not mixed use, but it's something more than what was there. I don't know. I guess I'm trying to figure out where that lies, where that boundary lies.
Mr. Chairman, did you want me to respond at this point? Or?
You can.
Well, I'm using the term spot zoning, I guess, at its practical sense of taking something in the middle of a block and treating it differently than the rest of the block. I'm not saying it's legally that necessarily for lawsuit purposes, but I am I'm just unclear as to where we're going. The more I see I think we learned some lessons in terms of the ignoring of standard assumptions about comparability in Green Hills and doing away with the concept. And we saw that people have very strong feelings about breaking up block faces, and apparently we can do two without it looking different than just one. I don't know exactly on that block if that rings true for me, but I'm just a little hesitant, and I don't know if that's answering what you're suggesting. I'm just a little hesitant to do something, to approve something like this without it being a little bit more than one lot at a time. It is something very, very different than anything we've done until very recently. To change the zone in the middle of a built-out neighborhood, one lot at a time. That's all.
So you think the solution would be to wait for a time that we change the zoning on that whole block to be mixed, to conform with the policy?
That's half of my argument. The other half is, I think we have to get serious before Nashville Next is completed on the underlying truth that we are creating a network of residential housing in our city that is in no way addressing the need for affordable housing, but is allowing more and more density without doing so. So those two things are kind of on my mind.
And if somebody were to build a single-family house there, that'd be more affordable?
Well, we don't have any control over what two houses are going to be in terms of affordability. We have certainly seen, the reason I voted for conservation zoning in Sylvan Park was it was at least a way to avoid McMansions.
Okay.
And I don't know if we're going to have McMansions in the Cleveland area, but who knows? So I'm cautioning, I guess I'm just thinking in a cautionary way about the pace of our rezoning using all the tools we have that has the impact of lessening affordability in neighborhoods and breaking up the way block faces look, I think.
Okay, I need a motion.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Second. Got a motion second to approve.
Yeah, motion to approve with staff.
The staff recommendation?
Yeah, staff recommendations.
Hunter?
I just have a question for staff, and it may have been mentioned during the report. Do I recall that we approved a similar situation, maybe on Joseph, a couple of months ago, or was this the one and it was deferred?
This was the case, and it's been deferred.
And there was another case that same night nearby that was more internal to the neighborhood.
That was Marie? possibly? There were several.
We've had several of these, and I
Yeah.
think we've had several on Joseph Street. I don't remember the exact
Okay.
location of the one that you're referring to, but I think we have had more than one.
Right, well.
And we look at each one differently. I mean, we're looking at the policy on each one, and because the policies aren't always the same, the situation's not always the same, so we have recommended approval of some and disapproval of some depending on the situation. You may recall there was one where there was an unbuilt alley where they were proposing front access, and we recommended disapproval of that. We looked at the policy on this one and determined that based on the policy and based on the detached nature of homes on this block, that this was appropriate to, and it would be consistent with the detached nature of homes and consistent with the policy that's in place for this area. But all of the ones that we've seen, back in May, I think we received 10 or 15 of these type of rezonings for SP on individual lots, and we've had to go and look at them block by block just to make recommendations on them.
Great, and for all those reasons, I'm going to support the motion. Thank you.
There's a motion second to approve with staff recommendations. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Aye. See those. Okay, the motion carries. Jason, we're ready for item number 5.
One speaker on each. 4 each.
Item 5 is a zoning request for property located in the eastern side near Wilson County on Central Pike. The property's outlined in red. It's approximately 14 acres. It is on the southeast side of Central Pike and New Hope Road. I-40 is just to the south. The request is rezoned from single-family residential RS15 to specific plan mixed use. That's another view of the site. The staff recommendation is approval with conditions and disapproval without all staff conditions. The existing zoning is single-family residential. It would permit approximately 44 single-family lots. This is a regulatory SP, so you're not looking at a specific building plan at this time, so we're not, or a site design. So when a final plat or final site plan is submitted, we will look at it to make sure that it's consistent with the regulations that are set up by this SP. So the primary intent of the SP is to permit assisted living or nursing home or independent living or a mixture of those uses. So that's the primary intent. They're also asking for accessory uses, which are listed below. So you have, or to the side, so you have office, medical uses, as well as like some things that are permitted there today, single-family residential, and then also they permit multifamily residential. Primary uses are limited to 120 beds for nursing home, 80 units for assisted living. The other accessory uses, they are regulated in that they cannot stand alone. So they could not have an office building or any other type of use that's on the accessory list without having one of the primary uses. And they have to be subordinate to the primary use. So they couldn't have a 500 or say a 10,000 square foot assisted living and then have a 15,000 square foot office building. So all the accessory uses must be subordinate to the primary uses. It would also permit up to the maximum number of units for multifamily is 220, and those are, according to the SP, age targeted. So they're looking at basically kind of like dormitories having centralized kitchens and those types of things. So they're not looking at a normal multifamily as it's defined in the zoning code. It sets up maximum FARs, maximum, which is floor area ratios, impervious surface ratios. It has setbacks that are required along Central Pike and New Hope Road, which would be 30-foot minimum setback. It also has height zones, so when you're closer to Central Pike or just say the perimeter, you have to be 3 stories max. When you get to the more interior area, you can go up to a maximum of 4 stories. It has buffer yard requirements, and those will come in depending on what use they're proposing and where it sits on the site. So again, it'd be kind of like looking at the zoning code today to see what they're doing, and then look at the SP and see what they have to do. So that would be determined at that time according to the standards. This is in the suburban residential corridor policy as well as the suburban neighborhood center policy. The suburban corridor policy is the majority of the property, which is the brown color. It supports all types of residential, including single-family, two-family, and multifamily, and it's intended for areas along corridors such as Central Pike, mostly to provide higher density residential to support the mixed-use neighborhood centers, like the one that's the small area that's on this property, as well as the area just to the west of the site. The suburban neighborhood center policy, which is on the corner of the site, supports residential as well as commercial uses. The plan, as proposed, is consistent with these policies. In conclusion, staff is recommending approval with conditions and disapproval without all conditions, as we find that the request is consistent with the land use policies.
Thank you, Jason. This item is open for public hearing. The applicant be allowed 10 minutes. You may keep 2 back for rebuttal.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Tom White. I represent the applicant in this matter. We've agreed to all the conditions that the staff has suggested. This was a matter I mentioned earlier on that was on consent. This is in Councilman Glover's district. There's been a number of neighborhood meetings, and there's been basically unanimous support for the project. We heard when we came down here today that someone had an issue with respect to an easement that they wanted. We've agreed with that. We've talked to them. Alan Thompson from Reagan Smith can address that. We have no problem with that being added as a condition. Councilman Glover is aware of that. He will add it as an additional condition to the bill as it comes through. It's an SP coming before the council. With respect to all the other matters mentioned by the staff, simplistically, it's totally in conformity with the land use policy. There's not a gray area. We're agreeing to all the conditions. We'd ask for your approval. Thank you.
Speak in support.
Mr. Chairman, Alan Thompson with Reagan Smith and Associates, representative of NHC on this property. As Tom mentioned, Mr. Fred Kane, who is representative of this property immediately south to us, had a concern that he brought to us today before the Planning Commission, thus pulling it from consent. His concern was no mention of utility easements within this bill, and what he would like to see is an easement that runs along our frontage from his property up to the intersection of New Hope Road and Central Pike. That would be a utility easement that would grant him the ability to access sewer at some point in time. We're completely fine adding that as a condition to this particular bill. We've talked to the councilman who is also in support of that, and we'd be happy to answer any questions, further questions in regards to the site plan.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in support?
My name is John McCormick, and I've lived in this community, all my life, and know most all the original people in there. But the engineers and people working on this we've had several meetings. Had meetings with the New Hope Baptist Church, which is adjacent to this property. We're just across the road, and we met with the building commissioner and the trustees, and they were all excited about this project. They had rather have it than a subdivision there, because subdivision would create a lot of traffic. And also, I've talked with the people at the Central Pike Church of Christ, which is just about a block up the street from it. And so I've met with 2 of the officers there, and they're in support of this. And also, we had a public meeting at the Hermitage Police Precinct, and it was a very positive meeting, and I don't think anyone was in opposition. This was a public meeting, and I don't think anybody was in opposition to the meeting, into this there. And so, anyway, there's a lot of things I could say about it, which I won't, but anyway, it has been, I have not heard anything negative about the meeting at all, and most everybody is glad that it's not being a subdivision, because it would create lots and lots of traffic where this plan would not hardly have any in it all, but, and also, this was the only track available for this type of project that was near the Summit Hospital. And so, anyway, of course, they would, if this one was not met, they would probably have to go to Wilson County or some other place because there was not any places available other than this one. So, anyway, if you have any questions for me, I'll be glad to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in support? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. I think the only issue is the easement that the gentleman earlier had spoke about. Yeah.
Staff, you said that there's not a requirement for a plan at this point, even though it's an SP. Can you explain that a little bit, please? I'm just curious about the placement of the buildings on the site in relation to the road and the hill.
It's regulatory, so the document contains requirements and regulations that we would look at that time. So that, like the height zone, so that you can only do 3 stories within, I think it's, I'm trying to remember if it's 75 feet from Central Pike or New Hope Road, and then inside you can go 4 stories. Then it also has setbacks, internal setbacks, and it has external setbacks along the street. There's buffer yard requirements. So it's kind of like if something came in today under straight zoning, codes administrators would look at the zoning code, and it says this is where your setbacks are, this, that. It's the same way when they come with the final site plan, we would pull this document, and it would tell us, basically give us the parameters for the development.
And then it would come back to us when they have the final plan to see that it conforms?
The final site plan would not come back to you. It would be an administrative review. If they can't meet the regulations or what's in the SP, then it would have to go back to council.
I guess I have a question. At that point then, can they get a grading permit based on this stage, or does that come later?
No, they can't get a grading permit until the final site plan's been approved.
Okay, and because it's an SP, I was wondering if, I noticed that we had a 30-foot setback. I wondered if, say this were an SP that was just a residential development, we might be encouraging a more clustered lot of keeping a hill and protecting it a little bit and grouping things closer to the road where it's flatter. Would we consider that on this site to think about how they, from our requirements, how they lay out the site?
Well, the SP, we would only look at what the regulations in that document tell us to look at. So if it's outside of what is regulatory in the SP, then it's not something we could control. There are some environmental constraints on here that I think they're working out with stormwater. I think there are some sinkholes on the site, but that's something they have to work out with stormwater as far as like, can they build on those? Do they have to maintain those and stay out of them? So really, until they come in with the final site plan, we really can't say what it's going to look like. You have your impervious surface ratio, you have your landscaping requirements, but there isn't anything specific that says you have to stay out of these areas or any area on the property.
How steep is that slope that we're looking at, for example?
There are no real steep slopes. Yeah, I mean, there's some rolling hills, but it's not steep as in like the properties that we were talking about with trees and removing trees. So it's not anything like that would fall under critical lot standards or anything in the zoning code.
Okay, I guess that was where I was headed.
Okay.
Any other comments from the commissioners or a motion?
I'll move approval to approve with the staff conditions, but can we also add the utility easement for the sewer as well?
Okay. Is there a motion to that? A second?
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Ready for item number 14.
She's back. Oh, somebody's go get her. Hey, John Michael. Would you mind?
record, you can stay now through the rest of the meeting. And there's two items, item 14 and 18. You don't have a conflict on either one of those two?
I'll just get
Okay.
to my short.
Okay, Melissa, we're ready for 14.
Not 6.
6. No, we're on 6
On
first.
6?
I mean, you don't have a forum.
No quorum.
Yeah, we do.
She's okay for 6.
Well,
we'll get away.
Where'd Andre go?
She just stepped out that way. She went to the bathroom.
Oh, well, I'm not going in there.
Item number 6. Bob, clarify that. You say item number 6, that was deferred.
No, I was saying that you need 6 commission members.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay,
I'm
so
sorry.
item ready for 14. yeah.
Get in front of the microphone
Okay.
before I say things.
Okay. Misunderstood. Okay, we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You ready?
Good deal. Item 14, 1223 North 6th Street. This is a request to rezone from single-family residential RS5 to multifamily residential RM20A on property located at the northeast corner of North 6th Street and Douglas Avenue. Staff recommends approval. The property is currently zoned RS5. Surrounding zoning includes RS5 and CS. The policy for this property is mixed housing and neighborhood general, and the RM20A zoning district is consistent with the policy, which supports a variety of housing types, including multifamily. The proposed zoning meets 4 critical planning goals, supports infill development, provides a range of housing choices, promotes compact building design, and supports a variety of transportation choices. In conclusion, staff recommends approval as the request is consistent with the land use policy and meets 4 critical planning goals.
Thank you. This item is open for public hearing. The applicant will be allowed 10 minutes. Keep 2 back for rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sort of hate to see that Stewart's not here because, this is, I guess, at a more appropriate location since it's at an intersection than, maybe the project that he looked at before, which is sort of midstream. And as engineers or planners, we have to rely, all we have to rely on is land use policy, and we can rely on the council member, and we can rely on staff, and that's generally what we try to do. So, and in this case, that's what we've done. We've relied on all of those, and this plan has been endorsed. It's appropriate. It meets the land use policy and the design policy for this area. Staff has recommended approval. It was on the consent agenda. I'm anxious to see, who is here to speak on this. I'll retain a couple of minutes, and we'll sort of go from there. We have a history of having community meetings. We try to get community involvement. We try to do everything we possibly can do to make your jobs as easy as possible. And I think we've been somewhat successful at that, or we wouldn't be representing so many projects before the Planning Commission and for the Council. Planning Commission staff does a tremendous job. We have a great relationship with them. We agree on things, we disagree on things, but they're friendly agreements and they're friendly disagreements. But ultimately, at the end, I think we come up with some really good plans and some that at the end of the day support the community, provide a mixture of housing, and provide them in the right locations. Just philosophically, things change. I see that a lot. We're sort of going through a philosophical change right now on where infill needs to occur. Candidly, we've talked to a lot of our clients about that. We're discouraging going into midstream blocks and taking one lot at a time. Maybe if they can get 2 or 3 or 4 or do something in a better manner, we're encouraging that. But the main thing we're encouraging is to come across some of these the thoroughfares and to start from the outsides and move in. And I think this is a perfect example of that. So staff has recommended approval of this. We would hope that you would listen to the staff and my plea. Feel a little bit beat up today, and endorse this proposal. Thank you.
Anyone in the audience wishing to speak in support? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Please come to the microphone, give us your name and address, and be allowed 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Gamble. I live at 1219 North 6th Street. I live next door to the said property that they're talking about. I think that this area needs to remain as a residential area. I've lived there for 40 years, and I've seen the neighborhood go down with the mixed things on the other end of the street. It was not a good thing at that time. We were not even able to sell our homes if we wanted to. If you're going to put in mixed neighborhoods, I've heard that they're going to put in 3 units there. The parking would also be terrible because some of the houses on that street do not have driveways, so they park on the street. Fortunately, I do have a driveway. However, I do have a detached garage, and when I have to park in there sometimes late at night, if you're going to have areas that for rental property, there's going to be a safety concern. If you come home in the afternoon after 4:30 or 5 o'clock during the winter months when it's dark, and some of the neighbors I know are women, and our neighborhood has now been rejuvenated and revitalized. They're building new houses, new families are moving in, and it's more like a neighborhood should be to me. Then on the aisle side, also on that street of Douglas, it is a very dangerous street. When I first moved there, there were all kinds of accidents because they seem to run out into that street. That street, Douglas, is a connector for Dickerson Road and Gallatin Road, which makes it very, very dangerous. There are seldom not any cars going up and down that street. That is not a good idea. To me, it just should remain just a single residential zone because it is a dangerous area there. People now can walk the streets. At one time, we could not because of the areas where people did not. Oh, I'm over my time. I'm sorry.
Give you another couple of seconds. Go ahead and finish your...
Sorry. But I'm quite adamant about it. I've been there for 40 years, so I love the neighborhood. It is now coming back to life, and I hate to see it go down in the other direction.
Okay, thank you.
Plus, it's going to lower our property value.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? You've got 2 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think she had a good observation, and that is that a lot of these infill developments that you're seeing are changing the nature of these subdivisions and communities. I've had several meetings in Cleveland Park. At almost every meeting, there's a police officer there, and he recites the crime statistics, and they're going down. And the reason they're going down is because these properties are being redeveloped. And this is a great opportunity to continue that at an appropriate location. We'll be working with the staff on any design under this RM20A zone change request. She's correct. It would probably only allow 3 units on this site, so you're not looking at great amount of number of units, but they'll be placed appropriately, working with the Planning Commission staff on an appropriate location, and will continue the revitalization of these areas. Thank you.
I declare the public hearing closed. Ruth, I'm going to start with you.
This is a question for the applicant, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time to ask this question, but can you address the neighbor's concern regarding parking?
Michael, unfortunately, was the one that's working on this. He had to go to another community meeting. But this is an RM20A, so there's not a plan certain at this point in time. What would happen is that the applicant would work with the Planning Commission staff. The RM20A provides some flexibility that you don't have under the normal RM20 zoning. And we'll work with the staff and Public Works on the location of access and parking. Certainly, none will be allowed in any location that would be dangerous. You do have an alley there. I would have to assume that that's going to be this main point of access. I can't fathom that there would be any access off of the main street there.
Thank you.
Hunter?
Could the staff just clarify what the parking requirement would be under this zoning ordinance for district?
Sorry, let me grab my book. It's a little smaller on space than usual. Got it for multifamily. Okay, so for multifamily, one parking space per bedroom up to 2 bedrooms, and then a half a space for each additional bedroom. But keep in mind that we did the calculations, they could get 3, maybe 4 units at this site. And that would have to be provided whenever they submitted their site plan.
Thank you.
Greg?
6 parking spaces. So how many parking spaces?
Well, it depends on the number of units that they get. So for 4,
Those are the standard parking requirements. I believe this is in the urban zoning overlay, so there's a reduced amount of parking for multifamily in the urban zoning overlay. So for studio and/or 1-bedroom, it's 1 parking space per unit, and then for 2-bedroom or more, it's 1.5 parking spaces per unit in the urban zoning overlay. I believe this is in the urban zoning overlay.
The other question that I had was, under the mixed housing, MH, and you said it's consistent with the policy? Does that, oh, there we go. Consistent with the policy. Could you just go into that in a little more detail on why you think that's consistent with that particular policy? And if I could see the overall.
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to it somewhat. For detailed questions, I'll defer to Cindy Wood, who's in Community Plans. But the mixed housing detail policy, it is intended for single-family and multifamily housing. That varies on the size of the lot and the placement of the building of the lot. So this would allow units to be attached or detached. So generally, the character should be compatible to the existing character here on the street. And in this street, you have, across the street, across Douglas, you have some single family, but you also have some commercial. So you do have a little diversity of character there. So
this little area that's changed, I mean, I knew about this area and it's changing a little bit, and I know that it's changing rapidly, but thank you for your explanation. That's all the questions I have.
Walter?
No comment.
Andre?
Not trying to beat you up. I just have a question. I mean, part of the appeal of the other one that we saw is that we already had an empty lot. This one, in a viable area where we have a house, we're tearing it down to put in 3. So sometimes I feel like it's good to use develop where we don't have something, where we either, well, anyway, I'm not being very articulate. Here's my first question. The 3 little lots that face Douglas to the west of this, are those individual houses facing Douglas? I just caught your phrase when you said consistent with the things around and on Douglas.
So, yeah, those do look like they are single-family houses facing Douglas.
But they're deeper than this lot would be.
Yes.
So presumably this lot would use the alley, but it could have, if it were maxed out at the permitted 4 units and they were 2-bedroom, it could have 6 parking spaces.
Yeah.
So I guess it's just the reality of parking and the ISR and all that would address how many units and bedrooms they could really have federally.
That's correct. There are definitely other factors that would provide constraints on what could be built on this site other than the zoning.
Okay.
They could always keep the existing house and split it into 2 or 3 or add on and create.
Or add a 3rd unit and let it add another building and then have that be 3 units.
Of course, that wouldn't be controlled by the zoning,
Right.
of course.
Environmentally, it might be nice. Okay.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion second, approve with staff recommendations. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Leslie, you're on again for number 18.
Yeah, I'm bringing this home. All right.
You can go home after that one.
All right. Oh, wait, that is not the one. Sorry. Yes. All right. Okay.
question here. That was on consent.
Number 16, number 16 was the Melrose Gale Park PUD. That was on consent.
Okay.
It's 1B.
That's right.
She spoke.
Okay, we're ready now. All right, item 18, cottages of Nebraska. This is a request to create 2 lots on property located at the corner of Nebraska Avenue and 49th Avenue North. Staff recommends disapproval. The subject property is currently zoned RS 7.5, and it falls under the Urban Neighborhood Maintenance Policy. This is an infill subdivision in a neighborhood maintenance policy, which does trigger the lot compatibility analysis, including for lot frontage and lot size. The proposed subdivision does not meet either of these elements. For lot frontage, the smallest frontage proposed is 47.5 feet. In order to meet the subdivision regulations for this, both lots would have to be at least 52.5 feet wide at the road. With regard to lot size, the minimum proposed is 7,600 square feet, and in order to meet the subdivision regulations, both lots would have to be at least 7,826 square feet. The applicant in this case requests approval under the provision that allows the Planning Commission to approve the subdivision if it is found to provide for the harmonious development of the community. So here we have the proposed subdivision. It does include 2 lots, both of which are oriented toward Nebraska Avenue. The subdivision, as we stated before, does not meet the infill standards. However, the applicant has proposed some conditions and efforts to make the subdivision harmonious. These include limiting access for both lots to the alley at the rear, also limiting building height to 2 stories and 32 feet, as well as platting a street setback of 31.7 feet. Here we have some views of the property. This is looking onto it from 49th Avenue North, and looking there was a house here. It has been demolished, and then this is a view of the alley that would be utilized if approved. In conclusion, staff recommends disapproval as the proposed subdivision is not consistent with the subdivision regulations.
Okay, thank you. This item is open for public hearing. Applicant be allowed 10 minutes. No 2 back for rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Council. My name is Scott Pulling, the applicant, and we shouldn't take near 10 minutes, but I would like to keep 2 for rebuttal if we could. Like Mr. Dale said, most of the time, we agree with the staff, and that's what we have. In this particular case, though, it seems like we met all the requirements except for the lot compatibility. And I understand that the staff's view of lot compatibility only compared the 3 lots to the west, and that's all. We're on a corner lot. When we did a lot compatibility with the 4 lots to the north, the 4 lots that are across the corner there to the northeast, and the 4 lots to the east across the road, we came up with much better lot comparability numbers, and I have this if you need me to give it to you. But we noticed that with the frontage analysis with these lots, the 70% of the average lot frontage would be 40.5, and we're well above that at 47.5. Same thing with the lot size analysis. Using these lots at that corner, the 70% of the average of the lot size is 6,576 square feet, and we're well above that with 7,600 square feet. That's one part of the lot comparability. Also, in this neighborhood, Sylvan Park, there are about 8 other properties within 2,000 feet, still in the Sylvan Park neighborhood, that are well below our lot frontage. There's some that are at 42 feet, some that are at 48, some that are at 40. And once again, we're only asking for 47.5. So we agree with the staff on most everything, but in this case, we think they should have widened their area, especially on this corner, for their lot compatibility, instead of just the 3 lots that are adjacent to us on the east. It just seems to be an unfair comparison. And also to address the plat concerns like Ms. Sajid said, we're happy to put any other type of restrictions that would help be in harmony with the character of the neighborhood. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Rebuttal.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone in the audience wish to speak in support? Anyone wish to speak in support? Okay, seeing none, anyone wish to speak in opposition?
Hi, my name is Emily Kitus. I live at 4409 Nevada Avenue. I own the property directly beside this property, which is 4905 Nebraska Avenue. I've owned it for 7 years. I have 2 small duplexes on it that were built in 1960. When they tore the house down next door, I assumed another large house would be put up there and, accepted that. Now knowing that they're trying to put 2 houses up there, and the houses will definitely be the 5 feet from my property line, and they will tower over my properties, and it will basically change the whole demeanor of that area. And so I'm asking, that you guys don't allow this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Good. Microphone, give us your name and address, please.
My name is Robert Chick, and I've lived in Sylvan Park since 1987. I'm on the other side on Colorado from a piece of property. I concur with the staff that, and this will come as no surprise to anyone, that in Sylvan Park, we're rapidly making an attempt to take lots, divide the lots, and put large homes on them. The issue I have is just exactly where the line's drawn. In many of the cases, the houses where 2 houses are allowed, they were duplexes at one time, or one was rented down at the bottom, and they've put houses up there, 2 large houses up there. The issue I have is just, I don't believe it's harmonious to the neighborhood, and I would like to see some restrictions placed on the size of lots there, and dividing the lots and putting multiple houses on the same one. 10 more seconds.
Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
I think we cut you short, so go ahead.
And I owe the chairman and the board, commission, an attaboy, because this is the first time I've appeared. And I was interested in the concept of, if you build more houses on a lot, it'll attract middle-income people. In other words, it'll drive prices down. My experience in that neighborhood has been that the last 2 houses that this particular builder built sold for between $600,000 and $650,000 each. So rather than the prices going down, what's actually occurring in Sylvan Park, believe it or not, and I'm not a builder, is when you put 2 houses or 1 house, the lot and the property compared to the house was there is almost unaffordable. I mean, you really are talking about, we were amazed. We were just amazed that 2 homes on basically what is 0 lot lines in Sylvan Park sold for close to $650,000 each. That shouldn't affect the board's decision, but it is an indication of we're not, in my opinion, we're not creating housing, affordable housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak in opposition? Seeing none, that's got 2 minutes.
Thank you. I think this is Jason Bachman, the owner and developer, and he could speak a little bit better about the character of the architecture and the height restriction.
State your name, please, and address.
Jason Bachman, and I am the owner of this property here. I live in Mount Juliet currently. As far as the concerns of the neighbors, I can certainly understand and appreciate that. The average lot size, if you zoom out from the compatibility study that was done by the planning department in the entire neighborhood, I'd say over 80% of the homes are on a 50 by 150 lot. This lot is 47 and a half by 160. So the overall area is actually larger than the average lot in the neighborhood. We are putting a height restriction on the house in order to help neighboring property owners so they're not feeling as though they're being towered over. We do have a 32-foot height restriction on there, and we are at this time trying to meet the demands of the buyers in the neighborhood. Sylvan Park is a very fast-growing and quickly appreciating area, and we have several buyers looking for products like this, and the demand for these products is definitely there. I'd ask the board for approval based on our lot size being compatible with the other lots in the neighborhood as a whole, rather than just on this block, and also the characteristics of the home that we're building, the size, width of the house, the height of the house, the characters of the house have been built numerous times on narrower lots in the neighborhood that have been approved by the same board here in the last year. That's all I have at this time.
Got 5 seconds. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, I declare the public hearing closed. Greg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a subdivision, which is, where we spent a lot of time and energy, public hearing. We came up with what I thought was a very fair compromise from both the development community and also the citizen community, and I felt like that was fair. And the problem in my mind is consistency, and when you start making exceptions to what we had compromised on and everybody came around the table and agreed to, I think the developer has done a good job in trying to address compatibility, but under the new standards of our subdivisions, this doesn't meet the policy, and it doesn't meet the lot frontage piece and the lot size piece, and so there's kind of, in my mind, 2 dings against you, and you get into that slippery slope. And me personally, I just can't vote for something that, when we all agreed to what was out there, I just think that this would be a slippery slope. So I want to hear what the other commissioners say, but I am inclined to not support this.
Hunter?
I'd like to ask the staff to address how you looked at the comparability, and could you remind us how do the subdivision regs regulate how you do that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, so the section regulating infill subdivisions for the policy that this property is in does require us to look at the 5 lots on either side of this property on the same block face. So looking here, we have the subject property. There are, to preface this, it does allow exclusions for lots that are not residential in nature, so a school, a park, and so forth. So in this case, we looked at the 3 lots to the west, and it is at an intersection, and both lots were proposed to face Nebraska Avenue, so we stopped there. Had one been facing 49th Avenue, it would have been possibly a different scenario. But we did follow the subdivision regulations as they were written for how to analyze this.
Great, thank you. And I agree with Greg that, I'm not sure we really have a choice here that to make exception to the subdivision regs. Though I do think this is a good example that reminds me that we need to continue to look at how we're applying our subdivision regulations, and since they're so new, if that lot 255 right next door was another 10 feet wider, I suspect even a 50-foot wide lot wouldn't meet the comparability. And you look at this neighborhood, and the whole neighborhood's 50 feet. So I worry that perhaps I think we just need to look at that, and is it in a case like this, you have an odd lot next door that actually sounds like has 2 duplexes on it. So there's 4 units on that neighboring lot that's driving the average size and width up. So it seems like we need more flexibility and perhaps the ability to look at 4 corners in this case, to look at across the street, to look beyond. And I know we hashed this out for several meetings over and over, but I do think this is a good example that shows perhaps we're looking at too small of an area, and that there may need to be some room for exception within the subdivision regs when you have an odd situation such as an extremely large, unusual lot nearby.
Well, and that's why we have it in front of you today, is because although it doesn't meet it, it misses it short on frontage and on lot size, is the reason we brought it before the commission, because we believe the commission does have that discretion to see when it would be appropriate and when it wouldn't. But giving staff clear direction so that we're able to process the number of infill requests that we have, it's better to have these very clear guidelines. And then when we have something like this, that falls short of those, to bring it before you and let the applicant make the argument about why that discretion should be exercised by the commission.
You can ask us a question, but if this was subdivided into 2 lots facing 49th, then I guess, Melissa, would the road frontage then meet the criteria?
Well, we did not analyze it since it wasn't proposed that way, but just based on the numbers, it's very likely that the lot facing Nebraska still would not meet the lot area.
Facing Nebraska or facing 49th, if they were?
If it was, well, hypothetically, if it was split this way, the lot facing Nebraska would still not be able to meet the, I forget how much square feet, the 7,826 square feet.
The square footage is not, it would meet the road frontage, but not the square footage?
Possibly.
Yes.
Okay, so thanks, Doug, for that explanation, and I think it helps me understand what we have the ability and authority to do and in applying the subdivision regulations. And 47 and a half feet, I'm not sure where I fall still necessarily on this, but 47 and a half feet is 2.5 feet off of what appears to be the typical lot size. And so I don't. This is not like a case where we're squeezing 2 really skinny little homes on a 50-foot lot, which we see that, and there's other tools that we've seen today to do that. I think the lots that would be created here would create very similar lots to what's all around it, and the homes that would be built on those would probably fit right in at 2 stories, limited to 2 stories, whereas there's probably 1.5 2-story homes throughout the neighborhood. So I'm inclined to support it. I wish we could have more of an analysis of a larger area, including the 4 corners around the intersection, to confirm that it would then meet the regulations, but that's, I suspect we can't do that analysis here today.
No, we have not done it. Would be, I don't think we'd be able to do it right here today. So, I mean, that is, like Doug and Melissa stated, there are some ways that the commission can look at these that are in the subdivision regulations that deal with if they're harmonious or not. And so, I mean, that there are, if the commission wants to look at the larger area, that's something that can be done.
Okay, well, my final comment, I think, is that generally I think this proposal would be harmonious with the rest of the neighborhood.
Bob? Do you have the language by any chance that you can share with the commission about their discretion?
Yes.
Making a determination about whether it's harmonious or not?
Yes. letter F of this particular section of the subdivision regulation says that if the proposed subdivision meets subsections A, B, C, and E of this section but fails to meet subsection D, the Planning Commission, following a public hearing in accordance with the Planning Commission rules and procedures, may consider whether the subdivision can provide for the harmonious development of the community by otherwise meeting the provisions of TCA 13-4-303A. In considering whether the proposed subdivision meets the threshold, the Commission shall specifically consider the development pattern of the area, any unique geographic, topographic, and environmental factors, and other relevant information. The Commission may place reasonable conditions as outlined in Section 3-5.6 necessary to ensure that the development of the subdivision addresses any particular issues present in an infill subdivision and necessary to achieve the objectives as stated in TCA 13-4-303A.
That helps. Remind me, when we have alleys, does subdivision regs or any of public works regulations require driveway be accessed solely from the alley?
Yeah, the subdivision regulations do in, I guess, particular instances, when lots are a certain size.
Do you know if it would require it in this? And if not, I think I would like to make that a condition, because I think that's consistent with the pattern of the neighborhood as well.
Well, in this case, they have put the note on the plat that would require the access to the alley, that they would not have access to Nebraska. Okay. That was what the applicant had proposed as part of this application.
Thank you, that's all.
Really? Just got one question. Because of so much discussion we've had on these infills subdivision lots, I know we look at two houses on either side of it normally, unless there is on a corner. What happened? What is the ruling on it when that reaches a corner and you just got two houses on your left and a corner on your right?
Right. That is one of the requirements of the contextual overlay that we've been working on. And in that case, on the corner lots, you would look two houses on one street and two houses on the other street. In this case, under the subdivision regulations, we're required to look at up to 5 houses, up to 5 lots that are adjacent to the proposed lot to be subdivided.
Even if it crosses the street?
No, not if it crosses the street.
Okay.
It stops at the street.
Okay, stop at the street. I'd like to make a motion to we defer this until we have a little more time to look at a wider view as to how we're going to do this.
I mean, I think that you can do that. We would just need some direction on how wide of a view, how far out we would go in this particular case. Because, I mean, the subdivision regulations state that you only look at the lots on either side, the 5 lots on either side, and you don't cross the street. So for this case, and other cases, I guess we would need direction on how far out we would be looking.
Is it possible we can discuss it with our leadership to see if we could use the same process that we use on a contextual overlay to apply to this?
Well, I mean, that can be done if we need to be looking at this one, but I think what you're talking about may be some sort of amendment to the subdivision regulations if you want a different standard to be set for reviewing these subdivision regulations, for infill subdivisions.
Okay, well, I'm just asking, I don't know, maybe we need to ask.
I mean, there is, based on
the
the current language in the subdivision regulations, there's the ability to find that this one is harmonious, but you've got to articulate what it is that makes this one harmonious with surrounding area. And as I read, there is language in the subdivision regulations that would allow you to find that to be harmonious. You just have to clearly state what that is. And if you want us to analyze this in another way, then we can do that.
Well, I'd like to make that motion and see if we have enough time to do that, if we could. We'll probably consult with Mr. Sloan to see if there is a possibility of clearing it up.
if it would help the commission, and if your motion is to defer it, then we can bring it back and give you an accounting of what the lot sizes and frontages are for Nebraska for a couple of blocks, so that you have a better idea about whether it is harmonious with the area, if that would assist the commission in making that decision.
Let me ask this. Bob,
what you were asking about?
Yeah, it would, though I'm not sure how we should instruct the staff as to how far we look. I mean, I think based on the language that Mr. Lehman read out of the subdivision regulations, I would be prepared to support or make a motion or support a motion to approve tonight based on it being harmonious with the neighborhood. And I could go into the reasons why, but so I'm not sure we necessarily need to go through that study, but if the commission needs more specific numbers and proof, then we could defer it.
there is a motion to defer. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second it, okay.
I have a question.
Before, let me ask this question. The analysis was made on the 4 lots, lot 254, 55, 56, and 57.
Well, it did not include the subject property, so 255, 256, and 257.
That was a comparable, correct?
Those were the lots that were used
Okay.
for the...
Would the regulations not support going on the other side, staying on this side of the street, but going east down to 40, was that 49th, 48th Avenue, and those looks like 6 lots. If that comparability, if they were taken into account, along with the ones, the 3 to the left, and then the 6 across the street, but on the same side of the street, analysis made on that, do you know how that would compare?
Well, we didn't analyze that. The subdivision regulations don't allow us to skip over a street, and in this case, you have 49th Avenue North. So that hasn't been evaluated because it does not comply with the analysis that we had to perform for this.
The effect of deferral might, if you did that, might then give us more support, saying that comparability there, rather than just saying that these 3 to the left didn't do it and dropped it. Greg?
So I have a question. So under the subdivision regs, is it 5 houses to the?
It's 5 houses on either side on the same block face.
Okay, so in my opinion, and this is just an opinion, is that and it's a slippery slope question, is that with this, you have a smaller sampling size than that's in the reg, so you have a problem. So potentially, I would be willing to support something that says if that sampling size is not that, then you could, on the same side of the street, skip over or whatever this commission wants to do. But I think that we still need to stick with what was originally in the subdivision regs and then allow an exception if we don't have the sampling size that we need. So that's my opinion. Now, that might be different here, but that way it's only a small exception and we're not making a huge slippery slope. So that's, I don't know what y'all think about that, but that's my 2 cents.
We've got a motion second to defer. Andre, you hadn't spoken yet.
I just have one question about the policy. Do you have a policy picture?
All right.
And the light brown versus the purple?
The purple is actually an open space policy, and a maintenance policy.
And the light brown?
And that is a neighborhood maintenance policy.
Okay. I just wanted to, that answers my question. Thank you.
Commissioner Atkins, were you suggesting that if we were to defer it and ask the staff to analyze it in a way that's different than the subdivision regs, that's a slippery slope of, doing that other ways, as opposed to us just making the judgment call tonight based on certain factors that we believe, and we may not all believe, but the motion could be made that it's harmonious and for certain reasons, without necessarily getting into technical analysis, specific technical analysis different than our subdivision regulations.
Well, I think that we have the flexibility when you're in a unique situation to go beyond those regulations. And here you've got the open space. You've only got 3 lots to compare it to, which is kind of unfair if the regulations say 5 each direction. But doesn't allow us to go across the street even on the same side of the street. But if we defer it, would be to come back with analysis, but also maybe to amend those regulations to say in some cases where you are restricted, where you don't have 5 on each side, that you can cross that street if it's on the same face. It's not the same face block, it's the same face.
Well, and we could do that. We might get into a debate on what should be included, because to me, both sides of the street play part of the character of the neighborhood of that street, and so I would argue that you should go 5 to one side, 5 to the other, both sides of the street, regardless of whether there's any intersections. That sort of defines your immediate neighborhood. Now, I know that's not what our regulations say, but if we're gonna look at amending the regulations, I would, and I think this is a case, and we haven't had our regulations in place very long, so I think this is a case that is kind of showing that and maybe we're moving back toward where we were 3 years ago again. There's Doug, but
well, the very thing that the commission is battling with right now was a discussion internally about how to deal with unusual circumstances, just like the one that you have in front of you. And the reason that the language was echoed from the state statutes regarding your authority to make a determination about whether or not the subdivision is harmonious with the neighborhood was put in there was to deal with these very situations, and for this commission to make a determination when it doesn't match up spot on with the subregs, that the measurements don't match up, or that in this case, where the sampling size is small, sometimes where it's on a corner, where it's near an open space, a lot of the issues that we discussed internally when looking at how we would write the subregs exist actually before you today. And so we wrote that in there to create the discretion for this commission. Now, what we can do is, and we will do in the future, is that when we have cases like this and bring them before you, we'll try to prepare for more information than just what our subregs call for, so that as you have questions, that we're able to answer those. But again, we did think about this. We did think about these very circumstances, and that's why we wrote in that level of discretion, and why we pointed to the state statute that gives you that authority.
Well, given that, and again, the concern about a slippery slope if we ask the staff to start looking at it specific ways outside of our regs, I think I'm going to not support the deferral in hopes that that another motion comes up to approve it based on being harmonious with the neighborhood.
You made the second, didn't you? I did. You still stick with your second?
I can withdraw. We can take a vote on it.
Okay, the motion is to defer. All in favor? Aye. Let me see a show of hands. Opposed? The motion fails, so now I need another motion.
I'll move we approve the subdivision as proposed with its conditions, based on it being harmonious with the community, that the uniqueness of this location did not allow for a full analysis or full sample in the analysis of the lot comparability, and that the majority of the neighborhood appears to be platted with 50-foot lots, which is essentially what's being proposed here today.
Okay, you got a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion, second. All in favor of the motion, aye?
Aye.
See a show of hands. Okay, motion carries. Ready for Historic Zoning Commission, Hunter?
I don't really have a report, but we are continuing to struggle with some of the same issues that this commission's struggling with infill and DADUs and contextual overlays and all of those things. And I would like to request, I mentioned it at the last Historic Zoning Commission meeting, if I could sit down as the liaison between the Historic Zoning Commission and the Planning Commission with Doug and your staff and Historic Commission staff and review some of the new legislation. I know there's been some changes to the contextual overlay, so there's a lot of, there's the DADU, there's the duplex, there's the RS versus R, there's a lot of sort of factors here, and I'd just like to sit down and understand it better and see if we can work between the two commissions a little stronger.
Absolutely, and we actually have some issues that we would like to get a better understanding from Historic about, because I know that when I used to be counsel for Historic, the issues came up about how to incorporate a lot of green building materials and still have it acceptable into the historic overlay areas, and that was something they were struggling with because they didn't want to go counter to that. And we're running into some of those same issues in regards to stormwater. And I think some suggestions that Stormwater Department has made that is pretty creative ways to deal with capturing the runoff from development in the overlay districts, but not adversely affecting the structures themselves, but dealing with the land itself, detention ponds. And I'm not sure how that's being received at the Historic Commission, so I think it'd be helpful for both of us.
That's great. If Kelly could help get that scheduled, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Hunter. You have anything, Doug?
I do have a couple of things. First of all, I want to remind everybody that, again, as tonight, on October 23rd, we're going to have it's scheduled right now to have it here at MDHA Training Center. And it'll still be at 4 o'clock, but it'll be at this location on October 23rd. Our annual retreat's coming up on Saturday, August 9th, and that's from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And we're going to have that at the Nashville Main Public Library. It'll be in the Special Collections Room on the 2nd floor. I don't know if anybody's seen that, but it's a very nice room.
I might ask any commissioners that want any items on the agenda that day to let you know.
Okay, absolutely. If you've got things that you would like for us to discuss at the retreat, just send those to Kelly as well, and she'll make sure she gets those on the agenda. We've been struggling to find talent and get them employed in our office, and Lisa Milligan has joined us, and we stole her away from Hendersonville. So we're very happy to say that we found somebody that seems to be fitting in real quickly and has a lot of experience, so that's very helpful given the speed that things are moving in our office. But we also still have some other positions open. Planner 2 in land development, we still need to fill another position there. Then we've got the mobility planner for the community plans division that'll also work with MPO. And the urban designer for the design studio with some architectural background, and we have at least one interview that's coming up on that, so hopefully we can get that position filled real soon. I believe that's all I have.
Say 10 words of this.
10 words of this, I don't have a mic, I can't do that. I guess we're going to be dealing pretty much what Honey G was talking about a few minutes ago. We are looking at the contextual overlay, the council involved in that, and hopefully we'll come up with a solution that'll make everybody happy pretty soon. And that's basically what we're using all our time, is on the contextual overlay. Thank you for your help.
That's it. Anybody else got any comments? We're adjourned.
Hey, Doug.